Hi, welcome to English 115 Technical Writing, and this lecture looks at graphics and images. We're still talking about design, but we're going to focus on graphics, and we're going to look at the functions of graphs. We're going to look, or graphics, we're going to look at the characteristics of an effective graphic. We're going to understand the process of creating graphics, talk about using color effectively with graphics, and how to choose the appropriate kind of graphic. So just like with any element of technical writing, we talked about this in the last lecture on design, with graphics, I want to ask myself, who's going to use the graphic and what is the purpose of the graphic? What is the information that the graphic is trying to convey? So you want to select the right kind of graphic for the type of information you want to convey. If you want to talk about numbers and percentages, tables and charts are good. If it's a process, then you probably want to use a flow chart. Geographical data, you would make a map. Chronological or prioritized lists would be numbered, and then non-chronological would probably be bulleted. Placement and context. This is really important when we're talking about graphs or any image that you use in a document. The same rules apply. You always want to introduce the information for the graphic. What is this graphic about? What is this image about? Give the graphic a descriptive name. Give it a name. The dog ate my homework, and it's a picture of the dog chewing up a sheet of paper. Make sure the information is clearly presented. If it's a graphic, you want to select the best type of graphic to present the information, like the previous slide indicated. Provide source information at the bottom of the graphic. Where did the information come from? People always want to know where the data comes from, where the information comes from. And then once you've done that with your graphic, you also want to write a follow-up text after the graphic. And that follow-up text can be something like, this chart explains such and such or demonstrates such and such, just to kind of tie it up and conclude what information the reader or user should have found by looking at the graphic. Some general guidelines for graphics. Use graphics to supplement or clarify information. Always consider your audience. Discuss the graphic. One of the things that students do that it's just really confusing and not helpful is they'll just stick a graph in the middle of the page. No information about what it is, no headers, footers, lead-in comments, concluding comments, no source information. They've just got it on the page. And sometimes they do that because it's too big to fit on the previous page. And so what I always ask students to do is consider resizing it or redesigning the graphic so that you can keep the words and images on the same page together. The images and graphics that you use should complement your text, should provide further information. So you don't want it just stuck somewhere. You want it to be integrated. I've already said that. Intersperse graphics with text, use descriptive titles, make sure the graphics fit within the margins of the page. Again, you can resize almost anything. Cite all of the images from any source material. So if it comes from someplace, wherever that data comes from, make sure you explain to your readers and users where that data came from. And if you're using images or graphics created by someone else, make sure you cite that original author. Failure to do so is considered plagiarism, so you don't want to do that. That's a no-no. Function. Graphics should catch the reader's attention and interest. That's one of the reasons we use them. It also helps writers communicate a lot of information that is difficult to say in words or might make a document really wordy and lengthy. and it helps writers clarify and emphasize information. So it can really help your reader know what to focus on or what is really important by using well-designed graphics. Where am I? There we go. Graphics are indispensable in demonstrating logical and numerical relationships. So flowcharts are wonderful examples of those logical relationships. We're going to do this, then this. If this happens, we go to the left. If the other thing happens, we go to the right. So they really do show those connections. They also can communicate spatial information more effectively than words alone. By this, I'm thinking about maps and images, and we'll see some examples in a few minutes. And graphics can communicate steps in a process more effectively than just words alone. So your graphics really should complement your text and really provide additional information that words alone simply can't do. Graphics can save space, and they can reduce the cost of documents intended for international readers. So I think I've mentioned this before, but if you put furniture together anytime recently, you've probably noticed that rather than having it written in 5 different languages, a lot of things are just being demonstrated in pictures. So the pictographs make it easier to follow and make it cheaper to create the documents. So some characteristics of graphics. They need to serve a purpose. We're not sticking pictures in there just to be pretty. They need to be simple and uncluttered. They should present a manageable amount of information. The format should meet the reader's expectations. So if you're talking about numbers, I should see a bar or some kind of table that accurately depicts the information. And it always should be clearly labeled. Don't just stick an image or a graph in a document. Always, always label it. Creating graphics requires planning, producing, revising, and citing your sources. So it's kind of sort of like the writing process. We're going to think about what we're going to do. We're going to actually do it. We're going to revise it. And we're going to make sure that we have given a credit to wherever that information came from. So present data ethically. This is really important. It is easy to play with graphics and charts and tables and kind of hide data and information. So what you want to do is make sure that you are ethically presenting your data. First and always, cite your source and obtain permission. Include all of the information. Don't leave out key data just to make your case look better. Begin the axis in your graphs at 0 or mark them clearly. So if you're not going to make it at 0, make sure you mark it very clearly. Do not use a table to hide a data point that would be obvious in a graph. So use the appropriate and the appropriate type of graphic so that you are ethically presenting information. Show items as they really are. So if you've got a pie chart, make sure that your 20% actually looks like 20% and doesn't look like 75%. And don't use coloring or shading to misrepresent an item's importance. So, kind of make sure that you're being as honest and forthright when you're designing your graphics and using your images so that you are presenting information in an ethical manner. I said this earlier, you want to integrate your graphics with your text, place the graphic in an appropriate location, introduce it, explain it, make the graphic very visible, and make it accessible so that for visually impaired, it might be something that you can click on the graphic and it expands or can be enlarged in some way. plan your graphics. Audience, 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 and purpose, purpose, purpose. Audience. Who's going to be looking at the graphic? How are they going to use the graphic? Is it a list of instructions on how to do something? Think about audience and purpose. What are they going to do with it? Why do they want it? Think about the kind of information you want to communicate. Are you communicating numbers, data, research, directions, instructions, how to do something? What is it? Think about the physical conditions in which your readers will use the document. Are they going to be laying the document out on the floor and following step by step while they're trying to put something together? Are they going to be reading it on the computer? Are they going to be analyzing it in a white paper? What is it they're going to be doing with that document? How are they going to use it? When you're planning your graphics, think about time, money, equipment, and expertise. So time, how much time do you have? Do you have time to send out the document to a graphic designer? Or is it something, or do you have the money for that? Or is this something that's going to be done completely in-house and you need to do it? And if that case, what is your expertise? What do you know how to do? Microsoft Office, both in Excel and Word, have lots of tools to help you make graphics in images and charts and tables. So use those tools that are readily available to you. And equipment goes back to what I said before. You know, you want to be careful about how you use color if the document that you're creating isn't going to be able to be printed in color. If you can only print it in black and white, then it doesn't matter if you have 14 colors in your pie chart. Nobody's going to be able to tell the difference, and it's going to be ineffective. So ways that you can produce graphics. You can use a graph that already exists. You can edit, modify, tweak a graph that already exists. You can create one on a computer, or you can have someone create the graphics for you. So those are your choices. It just depends on those items I just mentioned. How much time do you have? What your expertise is? What resources you have available to you. All of those are going to determine how you produce the graphics and the images that you're going to be using. Use color to enhance readability. This goes back to design that we were talking about previously. You don't want to overdo color. You want to use it minimally and use it for in a way that follows a pattern. Use it to emphasize particular items. Again, I'll go back to that example I used in the course. You'll see that your graded assignments are always in red. So that's a way to emphasize that. It's red. It's a color that will get your attention. And use color to create patterns. Use contrast effectively, and I'm going to talk about that more in depth in a minute. Take advantage of any symbolic meanings colors may already have. Red can mean stop, it can mean danger, it can mean passion. So, you know, use colors that have meaning. Be aware that color can obscure or swallow up a text. So it can make it hard to find out the information that you have that your readers need if you've got 15 different colors going on the same page. That's very distracting and can really detract from the readability of a document. So again, number one principle, don't overdo it. Caution. Here's a way that color is used to establish patterns. These are different, the digestive systems in different animals. And you can see that color is used to indicate that these animals share some of the same organs or areas, bodies. So, for example, this dark green is the esophagus, and we can see it in the human, the kangaroo, the mouse, the pig, and the cow, the ruminant. You can see that they have a short, small esophagus. But so this is a way that we can use patterns to show a lot of information that it would take a lot of words to explain. I can just simply show it here. I've got my little color code and my pictures and my images, and it makes it really simple to understand what's going on here without having to provide a lot of words. Contrast is really important to enhance readability. And you can see here when I don't have high contrast, I have low contrast, the text is hard to read. However, when I have a light background and a dark text, or a dark background and a light text, the text is easier to read. So that is effective contrast. So you just want a big difference between the text and the background. It can be either light or dark, doesn't matter which is which, but you need a big difference between the two. The bigger the difference, the easier it is to read. And you can see that with mine. I've got the dark blue background and all of the text is in white. That's a high contrast. So graphics that help to illustrate numerical information, this is just repeated from earlier, tables, bar graphs, infographics, line graphs, and pie charts. I'm going to show you a couple examples of some of these. What demonstrates logical connections, diagrams, organizational charts, graphics that illustrate descriptions and instructions, checklists, flow charts, logic trees. Graphics that illustrate visual and spatial connections, photographs can do this, screenshots can do this, line drawings can do this, and maps can do this. So effective tables. Always indicate the unit of measure. Am I talking about dollars or cents or pounds or something else? In the stub, which is the left-hand column of the table, list the items being compared. In the columns, arrange the data clearly and logically. Do the math. Make sure that your math is correct. Always double and triple check that. Provide footnotes where necessary. And if you didn't generate the information yourself, the data, the numbers, indicate where you got that data from. Here's an example of a typical table. Here's my stub. Here are my categories. I've got the title, when it's descriptive, natural gas plant stocks, and it tells me the count, 1,000 barrels. Here I've got a little graphic that give me kind of a key, NA, not available, W, withheld, and then I've got notes, C definitions. I've got the release date, when this information was made, and the next, when the next information is going to be made. So I've got a lot of information here in this table, and it's provided in a way that's easy to read and easy to calculate and find information. Bar graphs. Make sure the proportions are fair. If possible, begin the quantity scale at 0. Use tick marks, marks along the axis, to signal the amounts. Arrange the bars in a logical sequence. Place the title below the figure. Indicate the source of your information if you did not generate it yourself. You kind of seeing a pattern here? And here's an example of a good bar graph. Again, I've got my descriptive title. I've got what it's in percent. I've got the ticks on the side here. I've started at 0. I've got the label on the bottom. And again, I've got the ticks on the right-hand side as well, just to make it easier to follow along. And I've got a title, Figure 1, Tri-County Inflation Rate this year to date. So these are my months, January, February, March, April, May, June. So you can see that clearly the 6.3 is fairly represented in the 4. And by having these tick marks, that's a way to ensure that you are fairly presenting your information. So pie charts. Restrict the number of slices in a pie chart to no more than 7. Begin with the largest slice at the top and work clockwise in order of decreasing size. Put very small quantities together in one slice. Place a label horizontally, not radially, inside the slice. To emphasize a slice, use a bright contrasting color or separate the slice from the pie. You can pull it out. Check to see that your software follows the appropriate guidelines for pie charts. Don't overdo full patterns, and check that your percentages always add up to 100. Here's an example of a good pie chart. Probably the only thing I don't like about it is that the 27% and the 5%, those two colors are very close, and I would like to see that be a greater contrast. Also, it doesn't follow the suggestions in that it doesn't have the largest number. It should, where the 27 is, we should have the 38%, then we should have the 27, then the 9, and so on and so forth. So those are some of the critiques about that particular chart, but it's a good start, okay? Line drawings. Line drawings can focus the reader's attention on desired information better than a photograph can, because you can have things pop out, which you'll see in just a minute. Line drawings can highlight information that might be obscured by bad lighting or a bad angle in a photograph, and line drawings are sometimes easier for readers to understand than photographs are. Sometimes with a photograph you're not quite sure what the most important information is, so excuse me, a line drawing can help your readers get that more clearly. And this is a great example of what line drawings can do. So the phantom drawing, this is with the dots that shows you that that these elements are inside this unit. Here we've got a cutaway which shows you what's inside the unit. And then here we have the exploded drawing, which again demonstrates or illustrates what's inside this unit. So these are all ways that line drawings can be effective, and different types of line drawings. And this is another line drawing, and this shows point of view, and you can see that your perspective, or what your sight line, is very different if you are standing than if you are in a wheelchair. And so this line drawing can demonstrate that, where if I had this as a photograph of a person sitting in a wheelchair and a person standing on a step, it really, without these lines, really wouldn't give us the same kind of information. So that's it for graphics and images. If you have questions, post them in the questions and comments, and I'll be talking to you again soon.